Okay, finally going live on Facebook in our Brandcasters group with our Podetize weekly coaching call. And I always like to start out everything while we have people start to join us and start to come in. I like to start with a topic. And today's topic is active participation. So, it's interesting that I've done about 50 interviews of top podcasters. We do a feature here. If you haven't been invited to be a part of the feature yet, it's probably because you're not far enough along in your show. You will get an invite into doing that. We create a feature for every podcaster on Feed Your Brand's website as a part of just sort of giving you publicity about your show, because as you get started with your show, sometimes it's hard to get people to write about you. So we kind of kick that off for you. And so you have to have a certain number of shows in, and you have to have been podcasting for a little bit before we'll do a feature on you. But then we do. But I've been writing for Authority Magazine now for about three and a half months, something like that. And I've been interviewing top podcasters in the industry, and I keep coming across the same kind of mentality about things. And it really became very apparent to me last week as I was giving a speech in New York City. So one of the organizers of the event said, "It is so amazing that you have stuck around all day and interacted with all of our people, that you came here early, you gave your speech, and you didn't run out of town." And I thought, doesn't everybody do that? Like, it didn't occur to me that that wasn't the way you were supposed to behave. Like, that wasn't the way you were supposed to. You were invited to come to an event, and you're invited to speak there, and if at all possible, you should do everything you can to interact and participate with the people who showed up and paid to see you. And so I thought that was just, I was raised right, I guess. I don't know. But it started to occur to me that this is a recurring theme that I have with my daughters as well. It's like, look, showing up is more important than anything that you do. Active participation. Our teachers taught us that most of our grade was going to be based on participation. How many of us learned that lesson and really took it to heart? And it is something that I really subscribe to. And I've noticed this ongoing theme that is exactly the same with our top podcasters, both on our platform and the ones that I'm meeting out there as I interview them, that the top podcasters are active, that they are out there seeking their own media. They're not just using a PR firm, they're active with that PR firm. So there's a conjunction happening. They're making decisions about what kind of media they are. They don't just toss it over and say, find me some places to be featured. It's not like that. They're actively participating in the process with them. I'm also seeing it in the coaching calls. When people who show up on the coaching calls, they do better. Whitney Lauritsen, one of my favorite people, she watches every video, she shows up for every call she can. She does that, and great. You can't always show up 100% of the time. I mean, that's why we have so many calls, right? So that we can catch everybody. But not showing up at all can really hurt your success, because you're not getting new ideas, you're not interacting with others, you're not creating an opportunity for you to continually learn and grow. And that's something that I believe in, is being curious and having continual learning as a significant part of your process. Because if you make it a part of your process, then you're always going to have it be, there's no excuse for you not to grow and learn and get what's the next new thing and how can I incorporate that idea. And I had a guy at the Inner Circle, Aaron Young's Inner Circle, and Aaron Young is one of our podcasters here, and he has this mastermind called the Inner Circle, which I absolutely love, and I've spoken there before, and he came away and he said, "You just gave me the one thing I came here for, and that is something new I hadn't heard before. I go to these events, I participate in these things because I'm looking for something new each time, and today you just gave me that new thing." That could not have been a better compliment. I mean, it was just that in and of itself is why we're here speaking, why we're out there sharing our knowledge, giving all of our information away for free on our podcast, right? That's what we're doing. But to not get engagement back, maybe it's something about us not engaging forward, not putting out that energy of participation, active interest, all of those things. And so that's what I'd like you to invite you to think about today, is like, are you participating in your own success? Are you participating in the idea of pulling out as much information out of the coaches that you hire and the companies that you are working with? Are you getting as much from them as they're offering you? Are you taking advantage of all of those things? You're paying for them. So take advantage of them. And if you're not paying for them, then, you know, and you're getting them for free, then take even more advantage of them, right? I mean, that's a definite opportunity. So one of my favorite things to do is to listen to your podcast. I wish I could listen more. I wish I had time to, you know, there's like 220 of you or something now. So I can't say that I've tried to listen to at least one episode of every single person's podcast, but I can't say that I have been able to keep up. But it is my goal to do that, and I keep trying because I learn something from you. And I may not, you know, I may go through your episodes and go, oh, that one sounds really interesting, and pick one that's relevant to me or relevant to something that I want to learn. So as long as I'm auditing you and I'm listening to you and I'm learning about you, I'm also helping myself learn too. Try to do that for yourself. Give yourself part of your own process on where you can be curious, you can grow, you can learn. The other thing I make it a practice too is I never write a review of an author's or book. I mean, it's one thing if I'm just interviewing an author, but if I'm writing about their book or if I'm going to interview them specifically about their book, I won't do it unless I have enough time to read it. That's really important to me because I'm a reader. And so if they don't have a good book at the end of the day, I certainly don't want to be out there recommending it. So research as a part of it, that's another success thing that I see from these podcasters who are getting really great guests. They've been researching their guests. And so that kind of interest in their guest makes their guest recommend another great guest. And so it's cascaded on their success factor. And that's an active participation thing too. It's not just, hey, I'm just doing this thing. I'm interested in this thing. I'm using this podcasting. I'm using it as a tool for myself. I'm using it as a tool for my business, and I'm using it to grow. So I just want to leave you with those thoughts that maybe getting more active and trying to participate more in the process of what you're doing and participate more with your coaches and your mentors and all of those things, finding ways to do that you make it a part of your process actually makes it easier to participate too. So, and find the time for that. So thanks everyone for listening to that, and I'd love to invite and open up questions. I know I've got someone on Zoom here, so I'm going to flip back and forth between the two, so keep patient. If you've got something you'd like to type in the chat, please do. Tony, you're live on Zoom, so you get to participate and go straight into that. And I just realized I didn't start my video on Zoom. Bad me. That was awful. Sorry, guys, but I did do it on Facebook. Sorry, Tony, you didn't get to see my face at all. Technical glitch here. That's because I wasn't looking at it. But you're welcome to unmute yourself if you have questions for me. And I'll keep flipping back and forth between the chat as well. So, hey, Tony, you have some questions? No, not at all. Like, I mean, look, we have feedyourbrand.co. It's not .com. I don't even think we've checked recently to see if we even could get feedyourbrand.com. It wasn't available at the time. We could have easily put podcast at the end. Many people do. So it is not a difficult thing for you to have the name of your show with the word podcast at the end of it. It's very common. So, I don't think agonizing over that is, I think you want to be consistent with it, but you shouldn't agonize over it. So in other words, if you're going to put your show name, Tony's Podcast, I'm just making that up, but it's going to be Tony's Podcast. It should be Tony's Podcast on Instagram, on Facebook, on all of the places. As long as you can get it in all of those places, that should be worthwhile. But to have it be something that's more difficult, longer, No, I mean, you can always repoint URLs. So, you know, there's no things like one of the guys I interviewed, Mike McAllowitz, and it's like a horrible name to spell. Like you cannot get worse, right? And so, you know, he has multiple URLs that he knows are easy, that he throws out from stage, that forwards to where he wants it to go. You can always do something like that. So the URL itself doesn't have to match, and very often it doesn't for many people. So I have another show called Product Launch Hazards, and it has hazards with 2 Z's because that's my last name. But I bought the other one too because I know people will misspell it. So you can do that as well. You can point to URLs. You got to just do it properly, but we can help you with that, making sure that that's right for you. But that's a really good question. So let's go back to agonizing over the name, though. I don't want to let you off the hook there. So you're agonizing over the name, which is it's an issue because it's an issue for a lot of people. You're not alone in that. And so you know, this is one of those things where how do you find the right name for you? How do you find what fits for you? And have you done my description exercise yet? I gave it to you at the event. That's why I asked you. So, okay, so the description exercise is to sit down and do 5 minutes recording about what your audience is thinking, where they are in the world, what they're thinking about, what they're struggling with, what they're looking for, what they aspire to be. So it's all about your audience. 5 minutes about why you're the perfect host for the show, and to answer those questions and to provide that for your audience. And the last part is, what does this show look like? What does it sound like? Am I getting guests? Am I just doing solo interviews? Like starting to imagine and visualize and verbalize what the show is. So it's a simple thing. It's an exercise. You don't have to have fancy recording equipment, but it's a chance to test out your recording too. So you might as well do that at the same time. And so just do that, because a lot of times when you go through that process, the name comes to you. So once you've done it, you can send it to us and we'll transcribe it for you. And we will actually rewrite your description from there, but because you don't have your show name, we'll do the transcription for you first, send it back to you, and your name might jump out at you. And that's a good time for you to reach out to me, reach out to Tom, to get some connection to us, to let us help you through this name issue. Like, what did you come up with? But doing that first helps us help you. So yeah, you shouldn't, you know, we have a couple, interesting enough, a couple from your group, a couple of you who are agonizing over things and not making decisions. And so, you know, this is, I mean, Mark should be kicking you guys in the butt about that. So, you know, this is not set in stone. I mean, you want to choose the best name possible, the best name that fits you, but it also is something that can be adjusted. So cover art can be changed, your description can be changed. All of these things can be changed. You know, you don't want to have to re-record, so having the right name for your show is an ideal thing. But also, at some point, you can always explain that, hey, look, this name just isn't fitting us anymore, and I've decided to change it. And then you flow into a new name. The new listeners don't know any better, and the old listeners were probably right along with you that it wasn't right for what you were doing. So yeah, I think, you know, this is the, you know, you look, think about how many website names we've all been through and how many times we've rebranded and renamed. This is no different. Yeah, you're not printing thousands of books, luckily. So anything else that you're struggling with, Tony? Wow. So remind me again what your shows are going to be about. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, if I remember right, you were kind of a little more focused on the business side of cannabis as well, right? So while you do want to talk about all things cannabis, you add a little bit more business focus. Yeah. So if you're having a short call about it, it's kind of a vetting between the two of you, right? Because in your industry, you could hit into people who are not quite scrupulous, who are just taking advantage of the cannabis market, who don't have deep knowledge. So I definitely would, because you have experience, be asking a question that highlights their experience, right? How deep knowledge do they have? How into the industry are they? Are you sure these guys are reputable? You know, and so being sure to do that. This is a vetting opportunity for you. So now, a lot of times, once you have a show established, I don't recommend you taking the time to do the 15 minutes, because more often you'll have met the people and invited them on. So you already have a connection to them, because once you're doing it, people reach out to you. And so you'll be they'll be all over trying to get to you. So you'll get an opportunity to have met them at an event, or just met them out in the field, or had a phone call with them anyway and say, hey, you'd make a great guest on my show. So you won't need to require it. You can do it if you want to, if it's somebody who reaches out to you cold. So when I do my interviews in the blockchain community, I don't know that community extremely well. So unless it's coming from a very reputable PR firm that I've worked with before, who's provided me really great top level guests, I require like at least an email back and forth answering a couple of questions, and then maybe a phone call. So that's how I like to do it. But 9 times out of 10, I know the people. So I've met them. I have at least enough to know this is someone I should be interviewing. They're going to be right for my show. But it's also, some people just are uncomfortable with the podcast interview process, and the call can help ease their fears about this. Like, are you going to be outing me? Or, like, especially when you don't have your show up yet, to give them an example. Look, I'm a nice, easygoing guy. I'm not going to be like, gotcha questions or anything. So, so it just, when you don't have that out, then having these screener calls is a great idea. So asking a vetting question is a really good idea. And then asking what it is that they hope to get from, the possible publicity that you're providing them. So understand what their driver is. And if they're all about pushy sales and, like, I get a lot of digital marketers asking to come on Feature Brand, and I don't want to inundate you guys with stuff that I think doesn't even work. And so they're very pushy about it, and it's very clear that they're just pushing their agenda, and it's not serving the community. And so you can just, you can tell really quickly by just finding that out. And then you'll want to have like a little brief spiel about your show, what it's going to be about, the fact that they're getting on the ground floor. Don't treat it like this is a negative. It's a great thing to be on the ground floor of a new podcast, because those are some of the most listened to episodes. So when people find a podcast, they tend to start from the beginning. And so those early episodes can have the longest traction. Yeah. So, and also, for most people, they do reach out to friends, family, people that they know, colleagues and stuff. So they also don't need a lot of sales on trying to get them on the show. So you can do that too. That's like Jerry Foster. I know Jerry, he's in the Podster group, and so he was like, "When can I interview you, Tracy? Because I need you to make me feel comfortable before I start interviewing other people." I'm like, "Okay, sure, we'll do that, but we're relevant." So like what I talk about and what he talks about are relevant together, so it works. So just make sure that they're relevant. It's not like, you're inviting your mom on because you like her. Everybody. Well, someday that might be great. Everybody finally want to meet your mom, but but not so early on in your show. So I'm not seeing any questions pop up on Facebook. So yeah, Tony, check your questions. If you have anything else, let me know. Yeah. It's being broadcast on Facebook. Let's be honest. But yeah, it's just you and me on Zoom here. So this is the advantage of joining in and participating. You're getting, you're showing it off right now. That sometimes, because of the time of day, because of of everybody's schedules. I know the summer is really hard. It's really busy in the summer. Just us making time for the calls is hard. So people don't show up as much as they do. We tend to, because people were conditioned to the last Friday of every month was our old coaching call. We only had it once a month. We have more people who show up, more of our seasoned podcasters show up only on those days because they're used to that date. Yeah, let's talk about it. So what are you thinking about? The cannabis. Oh, it must be Scott Carson. Yeah, good. Yeah, the cannabis. Mm, yeah, I like that. I like that. I like a general. So like my blockchain show is called the New Trust Economy. And speaking of, I just made a note that I have someone to introduce you to. So when I was speaking in New York last Thursday, I was on the same panel as someone. Oh, I spoke after a woman who is in the cannabis community in Arizona, and she was an incredible speaker. She'd make a great guest for your show. And yeah, and she was talking about the business side, about the investment side of cannabis and why you should get into it and why you shouldn't. So she'd be a great guest for you. So I made a note, I'll introduce you. But yeah, I think having a broad name is always a good idea. So like when we talk New Trust Economy, we're able to talk blockchain, we're able to talk cryptocurrency. It gave us a lot of broadness to do it. At the end of the day, what we're talking about, do we trust this thing or do we not? And so it gave, that's really the only angle that we had. And it is always my angle when I'm looking at any new innovation. So it really fit me, and it would just fit what we wanted to do, right? So finding something that, is it revolution? Does that fit you? I think that's the word maybe that you want to finesse and work on. And so when you do my exercise on the description, you'll utilize different words as you say that. And so, because you're not talking about the name of your show, you're talking about the effect of your show, right? What are people looking for? And you may come up with a name where you're like, that's more like what it is, right? It's, and so maybe it's not a revolution. Although, I can't say that it's not. I mean, when you talk about, we had our vote here, what was it, 3 years ago or something in California, and I thought this was going to be like a hot topic with my parents, and and my mom was like, oh yeah, all our friends, they've all discussed it. They already have medical marijuana license. I was like, what, Mom? When did this happen that I didn't know about, right? So like revolutionary at an age range that I'd never expected. So that when it starts to come into your world, I expected it with my daughter and son-in-law, not at the grandparent level, right? So yeah, you're right there. Yeah, because as you're talking about it, like, you're going to be using alternative terms for the industry, right? You'll be talking about hemp and talking about, you'll want to talk a little bit about those differences of like what people are grasping with an understanding of what's going on. How is it going to affect my local economy? How is it going to affect my business? How is it going to affect my personal life? What is it adding to our world, right? And as you start to think about those things, other terms may just pop out of your mouth as you describe it. So thinking about talking always when you're doing this is that your audience may be lay people, right? You're not making a podcast that's specifically for the industry. While you may have a lot of industry listeners, unless that is your sole focus, is only for the industry. You know, speaking to the converted is a different thing than speaking to those who are curious and interested in learning. I Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I don't want to say it's a closed community because it's not, but I think like there's a whole bunch of us out there goes, you know, who are like curious, right? We're interested. Should we be investing? Should we be using? Should we be buying? Right? You know, are these things scams? Are they really useful? Is there any information about that? Where would I go to get information about that? So we're all very curious, and if you can become a reliable source for all of those things, fantastic. And access to all of those things, fantastic. Now your podcast is extremely useful in and of itself. That's an authority podcast, right? You may not be an expert in hemp oil, but you can connect to someone that you believe is the best that you've come across. Yeah. 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 Yeah, exactly, because there isn't much out there. So when Tom and I first did our podcast on 3D printing, there were about 3 or 4 other podcasts out there, but one was like all news and information. One was from a 3D print industry journal, so they were basically reiterating stuff that they were writing on their website anyway, and so they were just stating press release information. And the other one was so dry and so scary that like there was no way we couldn't have competed against that. Like the guy was, I mean, it was like, could he talk any slower? Like it was just awful, and badly recorded. So, you know, there was that as well. And so here we came in, had some fun with it, had a different perspective on like, how are you going to use this thing and what are you going to do with it? And does the world care about it? And we became popular with the industry and with newbies and with teachers. And it just really expanded for us because of that. And so I see you as being in that place as well. There's a lot of shows today that will do an episode on cannabis, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of shows on it. There's a few, but there's not a ton. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and that's I think probably pretty accurate. So, you know, that's also something that people are skeptical of, right? So if you have a show that's all about it and at the end of the day they're hawking their own stuff, you know, is that as valuable as someone who has an outside perspective? Yeah. So, and another, yeah, it just dawned on me that I have another person for you. One of our other podcasters, Aaron Young, his best friend is Bill Kelly. And do you know him? Oh, good. You are. Good, good, good. I'm so good. Oh, he's awesome and a great guy. I've heard him speak before. He's got such passion for it, and he opened my eyes to something I didn't know about the purity problem, in and so that really opened my eyes to something that I had encouraged you. So they're solving problems in a really interesting way. You're gonna, yeah, definitely, you know, someone who you should have on your show. That's the caliber of guest you should get. So I'm he's a really good guy, and I'm sure that that he'll come on your show too, just because. Aaron Young is one of his best friends from childhood, and so Scott Carson and Aaron Young invited Scott Carson. Invites Scott Carson to speak at his events. I've spoken at Aaron's events, and I think it was the time before last, Bill Kelly spoke there, and I wasn't supposed to stay for that day, but I stuck around an extra day just to hear him because I've always wanted to hear what he had to say, and just fascinated by his journey about what he did. So for those of you listening, we're having this kind of conversation about him, but Bill Kelly is one of the founders of one of the companies that got bought out that eventually became WebMD. And I mean, that's just a fascinating thing. And he's, been a serial entrepreneur, built amazing, fantastic companies, and everything he seems to invest in and get involved in, it's at the edge of on the tipping point of something great. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sure he'll tell you all about it, but he's working on an oil purification system. So when you are, when you have, I'm going to call it infected cannabis, when you have infected plants, or they have some kind of mold or some kind of issue on them, what do? You toss them, right? And so they have a purification process that allows you still to use it as oils, and it becomes absolutely pure in the process. So. Yeah, and so what do you do with it? So it gives them an ability to buy this, subpar product, but still turn it into something really viable and safe. Yeah, so yeah. I mean, you can't. It's not like you can research what he's doing because he's not public about it yet. But But anyway, yeah. So good. Well, great. Well, yeah, good. I'm glad Scott did that. See, this is a valuable of our network. For you guys who are listening to this on replay, when you're on it live and there's other participants on it, we help each other here. And so we are always suggesting great guests. And so that's something that you can use the Brandcasters group for. So if you are looking for a guest in a particular area with a particular expertise, there's a really good chance that one of us knows them, knows someone. And so just type it in there and say, hey, I'm seeking a guest who has this experience, or has this authority, or has written a book on this, and we'll find them for you. Or, hey, I want to get this guest on my show. Does anyone know him or her? So that we can do too. So yeah, I mean, we are all really close. Like, I think that I've gotten some of the best guests by just asking my guests themselves, who else should be on my show? And if you've benefited from this, who else in your industry, or who else that is working in and around you that could benefit from being here too? And that always works really well, especially when you're doing an industry specific show. Sure, yeah. Okay. I read 90% of it and then realized it was giving me anxiety that and so yeah, so it was like I'll look it up on my phone real quick while we're doing this. But yeah, it was a book about TED Talks, about giving TED Talks, because I was asked, for those of you who don't know, so I did this event in New York called Exponent Women, and so it was 200 investing women in New York, and in all levels of investment, finance. There was a woman from JP Morgan, and people from family offices and parts of investment banking that I never heard of before. So like I felt like real in over my head as it was. And originally, when I was invited, I was just supposed to sit on a panel. It's called Talk Like TED by Carmine Gallo. Talk Like TED. And so, I felt like I was maybe in over my head at this point. And when they say, here I'm going to be on a panel, there's a woman with talking about cannabis. There's a woman talking about compliance and other like more technical issues in the investment community. And then here I am talking blockchain. That's what they asked me to come talk about. And I was like, well, I can handle questions. Like I do this all day long. I can ad lib anything. So no problem there. But a week and a half before, they go, hey, we'd really like you to do a 10-minute TED style talk and then answer some questions. And I was like, wow, that's way harder than I imagined. So Whitney recommended this book, which was just awesome. And I started reading the book, and the beginning of it was great, and took a lot of notes and incorporated it in as I was writing my talk. Because, when I give an hour-long talk, I just have a set of slides, and I do ad lib everything because I know my content well. But here there's no slides. There was just stand up in front and tell, and go for 10 minutes on a subject. You have to have a very concise beginning, middle, and end, and there's got to be stories in there. And so you can't, drone on, right? You can't get off track. And so it's a lot harder. But what I realized is that, and when I got to the point of the book where the book was talking about how much people practice, like how much Steve Jobs practiced before he gave it. That was when I was starting to have like heart palpitations. Yeah. I was like really worrying, like, oh my God, I don't have enough time to be this good at it. And when I got there, the funny part is that this woman, Sarah Presley, who I'm going to introduce you to, who's the camera, she was going first. So I was kind of relieved to go first. But she was like, did you get thrown by this too? And I was like, oh, thank God I'm not the only one who thought this was like a crazy idea. And none of us said, that's not a good idea. Like none of us stopped her. We just went along with it. So yeah, so it actually went really well. And the organizer, the person who had asked me, has pretty much known me for 25 years. So she's known me a long time, and she's never known me. She known me in a private setting, not in a personal, on a personal basis, not on a professional basis. And so her, she's the one who brought me into this group, suggested me, and she's sitting at the back of the room. And afterwards, she said, I didn't want to, tell you this ahead of time, but I'm so relieved you were so amazing because you just made me look so good. And I was like, oh my God, how terrible. Like, she was worried. I was like, oh no. Yeah. I was like, I'm glad you didn't tell me ahead of time. Yeah. So actually, so I don't have stage fright. Like that really helps. Like I'm not afraid to be on stage in front of people. So I don't have that kind of, none of that is a problem for me. I don't know why that is. I'm really lucky. It's never been a problem. But doing something like this, I did have my notes, and I, if I needed them, but I didn't end up using them. And actually we all went over our time. No one stayed on 10 minutes. I think it was like, I was like 13 or something like that. And no one said anything. They just asked one less question or something like that. So it worked out really well. And I actually thought I could do this. And I could really do this again. Like I could really sit down and maybe develop a good TED Talk. And so it inspired me to think that I never really wanted to do it before, but after having done that, I thought, wow, that was actually more powerful than I thought it would be. Yeah, 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 yeah. I did actually, and yeah, and so it was a fabulous event, and Stephanie Rule, the one of the MSNBC anchors or something like that. She has a show on MSNBC and financial, usually in I want to say that her expertise is in bonds and other things like that. But she was fantastic. So from the set of the very first talk of the day, it was just high caliber women all day long. And I have to tell you that I opened up my talk with saying, you know, I've never done this before. Not only have I never given a talk this short before, but I've never spoken to a room of this many women. Very often I'm the only woman in the room, and or in the minority within that. And so it's a treat, and it was awesome because of that. It was just different. Yeah, so thank you for asking. I I definitely found it valuable. So yeah, so you should definitely check that out. It was definitely useful. And I didn't even totally finish it. I have like maybe a quarter left of it. That but as far as I had gotten, it really helped me structure my talk. So it gave me the pieces that I needed, and gave me some ideas about how to tell stories, how to make them relevant. I mean, I tell stories all the time, but how to make them really relevant and concise, and and tie it from the beginning to the end. So I think that's a yeah, and for me, like I don't have trouble with passion about my stuff, so I was like, I got this one. So it kind of gave you confidence too, like, hey, I got this, I can do that. So yeah, well, wonderful. Well, good. Well, yeah, are you going to do a TED Talk? Is that what you're thinking? Oh, that seems really odd in a something that's speaking driven that it would be computer based. It seems like which is hard to motivate yourself for, right? Yeah. 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 I agree. Yeah, I'm a people person, so like I need that too. So I really do believe in continual speaker training. Like I believe in that. So come to think of it, maybe the very first exposure I had to speaking training was Dale Carnegie. So when I first started my career, it was required. We had to take 7 weeks of leadership training at the company that I worked for, which was called Milliken. And we had a week of statistical process control, which I might as well wanted to blow my brains out as a designer, like not loving it, but I did great, but I didn't love it. And then a week of Dale Carnegie. And so it was fantastic. And then, so we did a whole week on it. And then each week we would have a meeting and everyone had to give a speech each night. And so I think that probably was my first exposure to it. But it just, it was that environment though of watching other people do it that is helpful. I think you learn a lot from watching other people not be successful or be successful. You learn more from that than you do from doing it yourself, because you're kind of in your head when you're doing it. So you're like, was it good? I have no idea. I don't even know what I said, right? Like, and I don't like to watch myself after. Like, this is something for podcasters. So out there on the podcasting world, I really do highly recommend you listen to yourself in the beginning. And it's really hard to get over, oh my God, my voice sounds like that. Like it's just, but you need to listen to it to make sure that the sound quality is good, like it's the right pace of speech that fits you. But don't internalize it. That's the one thing. Don't internalize it and go, I have to slow my speech, and don't be inauthentically you, but just say, hey, people aren't quite understanding me. Maybe I need to change up how I speak a little bit. And so you're improving yourself. You're improving on yourself. You're not changing yourself in that process. But it's a really good idea. And one of the things that we find most people who definitely produce their shows themselves, we take care of it here, but their audio levels are all over the place. And so you may hear that here when you're listening to a live stream or something, because I'm active and I'm very animated when I speak, but our sound team will level that out. And so they'll make sure that that doesn't happen when you're listening to a podcast. So it's one thing when you're watching someone and you see them moving, you understand the sound change. But when you don't have a visual and you're just listening to it, it can sound it's just disturbing. Like the sound's going in and out. I have to turn my volume up and volume down. Like, what's going on here? And so it can be a reason people don't listen to your show. It's one of the number one criteria we have is making sure that you guys sound good. So our sound leveling and training on that is really important. But you have to think about that when you're interviewing your guests as well, Tony, because sometimes your guest sound is bad and there's just nothing you can do about it. There's only so much we can do. If they're quieter than you or louder than you, don't worry about that. But if it's crackling, or this is the worst thing that I've had, is like you have an inline microphone in your mic, and that's all that they have is an inline microphone in their headset. And then what happens is like, I'm here, I've got a lot of hair as I talk, my hair brushes against it, you hear this horrible sound, or you hear a continual click, click, click. There is nothing our team can do to get rid of that. If that happens with your guests, ask them to take it off and use their computer sound. We'd rather have sound from the environment than have something annoying like that. So if it's annoying and distracting you, stop it right there, because you're not gonna do your guest a service. They're not going to sound good, and that's not fair to them and not fair to your show and your listeners. Yeah. Actually, it's not. You know, yeah, it can be worse, because you've got like the microphone set up between the two of you, and sometimes it's awkward and uncomfortable, and it's not always the best. It's great from a dynamic, but we can't separate your sound as easily when you're in person. And so when you have 2-track recording, we can fix a lot of sound level issues, a lot of background noise. We can turn them off when you're speaking. But when you're in person, you tend to talk over each other, and you do that, and there's no way to fix it, because you have a single microphone, or even if you have 2 separate microphones, there's bleed over because you're too close together. And so that if you're gonna do an in-person, having a slightly better equipment, making sure that they're pointed separately, making sure you've got the setup right. If you're gonna do that, have a tech call with Tom and help set up with the best setup possible, because we can still get 2-track recording, and we can do the best we can. We can at least prevent the talkover that happens, typically with the right equipment. So yeah. Absolutely, he'll be able to tell you what to get, and we have a whole setup we've done for multiple people who do a lot of live interviews. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is nice, but you know what? It's not convenient always for everyone, and it can prevent you from, just making time to get the right guests. They're all the way across the country. Whatever it is, don't let it hold you back like that. That's your requirement. If you can make it happen because you're at an event, some of the events are the worst sounds I've ever had. Like, you just, because there's giant ballrooms, so the sound just echoes everywhere, and people walk by and they have no courtesy. So if you're going to do something like that at a big event or something, have a private room. Just go and pay for a private lounge, a suite, whatever you've got to do, and do your interviews there, because and a lot of times there are press rooms and other things that are accessible, and you don't even know it. Just ask. They'll treat you like press. They should. You're going to give their event and their vendors and their people publicity. They should do that for you. So yeah, go ahead and take advantage of those things, because at that point, getting some of those live interviews are really great, because don't forget to take your picture side by side, use it for social media, right? You want association with these great people in the marketplace that you're working within, or the industry. You should get that. What is his name? Russell Brand is doing a podcast, and he's been doing something really interesting. And so if you are in person, this is a cool way to do it. He's been doing this thing where he finishes recording with someone, so he waits till after, and then they stand side by side and they do a video recording of and he goes, okay, so what cool things did we talk about? In his accent and everything, what cool things did we talk about? And puts the guest on the spot, and of course it's some famous guest, right? And so that person goes, oh, I'm shocked, we went into this and you got me to say that, and so it's really genuine, because it happened, and they're excited about what they just said and sharing that, and he uses that as his promo video to push out the episode that's coming that week. And so it's a brilliant marketing plan. It takes a lot of organization, and you need to definitely prep your guests and say, hey, at the end we're going to do a 2-minute promo, right? So we're going to do a talk. I had another podcaster who did something similar, but they at the beginning made me say their show name. So, hey, welcome to the, whatever show it was. I can't even remember anymore. Or, I think I had to say my name, and so it was associating my name with their show. And so it was almost like I recorded my own intro. It was a really it was really kind of a cool thing. So the intro was in my voice for that particular show. So it was a little gimmicky, but it worked. And they had a sound bite to use. What's this thing? Yeah. Yeah, it was just like, hey, welcome to the, whatever the show is. I'm Tracy Hazzard and I'm your guest today. Like, it was like that. And then it was kind of, it's kind of fun, but, and that was just it. He had a different intro for every single episode. Yeah, it is. So, yeah, I still recommend having your pro intro on the front of that just because, but hey, why not? Rather than you start the show, try your guest starting the show. Wouldn't it be different? Who does that, right? Try something new. Yeah, and this is the thing. You get to have fun with your show. Your show doesn't have to be the same exact way every single time because you started that way. You think of a new idea, try it out, see if people like it. One of our hosts, he has a podcast called On the Shelf, and he was trying to figure out what to call his audience. So like he was like, do I call you On the Shelfers? Do I call you Launchers? Like he was trying to figure out what to call them because his show name didn't really lend itself to that. And so he just couldn't really figure out what to do. And so he went through like bunches of different names and finally settled on one like episode 10 or something that worked. And he calls them big boxers now because they want to get in the mass market retail. So he calls them big boxers. And it fits, it works. And people like it now. And so they call themselves that. They'll on his Facebook page, they'll say, I'm a big boxer trying to get into Costco. So they do identify. So, finding something that fits your community, you'll try some things and it won't work, and keep trying. They will. Well, when they start communicating back with you, you've hit on something. But usually that takes about 25 episodes. I'm just gonna be honest with you. Like it's that way for everybody. It just, some people do it crash because they do a lot of episodes up front. But it takes a certain amount of rapport to build with them and for them to have heard you. It's like, 7 touch points with someone, right? It takes a while before they hit in that point where they want to reach out. So are you going to stick around for me is what they're usually asking. Yeah, and if they find out you're going to stick around, you're going to keep providing them value week after week after week, they go, yeah, they deserve my engagement. So we got to wrap this up, Tony, but it's been such a pleasure. So as you come up with names, hey, that's what, this group is for. Float out a few names. Let us talk, vet them as well with you. Hey, we might be your future audience. So. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Okay. So everyone, this has been Tracy Hazzard on the client call for, I don't even know what today's date is. I think it's July 16th. And yep, it's July 16th, and we'll be back again next week. So make sure and tune in and maybe get yourself a free coaching call, a private coaching call. Okay, everybody, take care. Bye.